Here on the ground, change happens fast. Problems feel frequent and urgent. It's loud and anxiety runs high. From a satellite view, the Earth looks the same as it did thousands of years ago. We've been here before. Let's learn from our past and shoot for a better future.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of A Satellite View. I'm Todd Mickelson, your host, speaking at you from Monday, February 16th, 2026 in the space and time continuum. Tomorrow is a full moon, an eclipse, and there's also a lot of solar flares going on, solar winds messing with magnetism. You know, when the moon is full, people go crazy. You know, there's even reports of more people freaking out and getting picked up by the police, going to the emergency room, all kinds of different things happen on a full moon. And it seems like that's kind of an old legend, you know, not true. And it sparks, you know, werewolf story and things like that. But it is scientifically actually true. I mean, the moon affects our tides coming in and out. So, of course, it affects us. And a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed right now. And for a reason other than the sun and the moon and magnetism. I'm calling this episode The Great Unravelling. There are people who feel like their whole world is crashing down. Do you feel like your world is crashing down? Or do you feel like the world is crashing down? Or do you feel like the world, for some people, is crashing down and maybe not you? Do you maybe even feel like this world crashing down that some people are devastated by is almost making you feel better about the world? Like maybe something bad is ending so that something good can come in and replace it. That's what we're talking about a little bit here. Now, I'm not sure even where to begin this, but let's talk a little bit about hero worship. All right? I want to play you a clip of Marjorie Taylor Greene on a podcast called Keeping It Real, hosted by Jillian Michaels. Now, we know who Marjorie Taylor Greene is. If you don't know who Jillian Michaels is, she's a far-right woman who just absolutely sticks up for Donald Trump. I haven't seen her much, but when I have, I'm like, wow, she's really bought into this BS. And here's how she's being affected. Now, if you're watching this, you can see her. She's putting her hands over her eyes and putting her hands up to her forehead, and she's closing her eyes and nodding her head in negative ways, and it's like she's being overwhelmed by this news. If you're only listening to this, you can hear her becoming a little overwhelmed. I'm going to play you two separate clips here, and I want you mostly to focus on, because we've already been into the Marjorie Taylor Greene in an era where she speaks sense, and I agree with every word she says, but I want you to concentrate on Jillian Michaels here.
Right. And so we're having this argument, and he tells me on this phone call, he's like, Marjorie, my friends will get hurt.
That's it. That's it. I mean, that is it. Obviously, that's it. Because they're all in here. Imagine the phone calls. It's everyone. It's every single person is on this freaking list. They're all there. Every billionaire, heads of state, Larry Summers, Peter Thiel. They're all in there.
Could you hear her devastation in her voice there? Her whole world is crumbling down. That was, of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about Donald Trump telling her, these are my friends, they're going to get hurt. All right? And this is what Jillian Michaels and these other people are having to face. It's their world. Listen to this bit here.
I read this morning that Dr. Oz invited Epstein to some Valentine's Day party he and his wife were having in 2016. This is Dr. Oz that's currently serving in the Trump administration over Medicare. Exactly. But that was after Epstein had been convicted of pedophilia.
Could you hear her there? Oh, I love Dr. Oz. I love him. I love him. And she's so devastated that Dr. Oz invited the most notorious child rapist to his house for a Valentine's Day party. In 2016, long after Jeffrey Epstein was indicted and found guilty by, in court of pedophilia and rape of children. So that's what these people are being faced with. So Heidi and I were talking about this, and I said, what if we found out that Barack Obama went to the island and maybe even took place in some of this stuff? My first reaction is, throw him in prison. Now, I love Obama, but you got to be careful of hero worship. When you get in too deep, your world should not be built on other people, on hero worship, so that when your hero becomes to only be a mere mortal human being instead of the superhero you made them to be, your world can still remain. If Barack Obama was in the Epstein files and found guilty of these things, my world would not fall apart. I'd be surprised, because of course we know he's not in the Epstein files, even in this new list, which is hilarious that we got to talk about here in a moment. But I want to say, I've met, in music, I've met famous people. I've had conversations with famous people. In other, I've met George Lucas. I hung out with Bo Diddley. In politics, I've been with a lot of people, met a lot of people, and I never even have. Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I met them. I actually hung out with them at a fundraiser for a while and had a conversation with them. I don't even have a photo of myself with them, however. And sometimes I'm a little bit like, oh, it'd be fun to have photos with all these people I met. But I don't care about that, because these are people. They're all right. They're mortal human beings. Admire what they do, sure. Admire them. For if you see them as being a good person. Now, I've also known Dean Phillips, who I told people he's one of the best people I've ever met. And then I found out that he's actually one of the most insincere people I've ever met. And I was fooled by him, betrayed by him. But my world did not crumble because I didn't worship him. Now, I'm not trying to brag about me and my mental acuity. The universe knows that I do not have complete mental health under control. So I'm not trying to say that. I'm just trying to say, as disappointed as I am that I don't have a photo of myself with, say Amy Klobuchar, who might be the next governor, or I did have a meeting with the current governor of Minnesota. And I don't have a photo of myself with him. I don't have a photo of myself with a lot of people. Maybe that's disappointing, but in reality, I'm glad that I have the attitude of I'm just hanging out with this person. I'm having a conversation with this person in the real world. I don't need a photograph to show other people and say, hey, see, I know Tim Walls. Yeah, I had a conversation with him, man. It's not like I just passed him on the street. I'm glad that I feel that way. And again, not trying to tell people that I'm right and they're wrong, but be careful of protecting your world and protecting yourself so that you don't have the moment that Jillian Michaels is having right now, where her whole world is crumbling because fucking Dr. Oz is found out to be cavorting with pedophiles and child rapists. By the way, it just came out literally moments before I started this recording that in the UK, they're realizing through analyzing emails and all kinds of things that likely, the terabytes that they had, the authorities had, there's probably 100 million more files in the Epstein files. The 3 million that have been released maybe make up 2 to 3% of the actual Epstein files. Not 50%, not half of them. So it's going to who knows? It's going to go on and on. By the way, I want to stick in a couple things too. Pam Bondi saying that everything's fine because our market just surpassed 50,000. The Dow, whatever. I don't follow. I'm not knowledgeable at all about that kind of stuff. But everybody, the administration's trying to make a big deal out of it, even though it did fall below there. Again, apparently there was some sort of crash on Saturday. Don't hold me to any of that. But there is other actual market experts saying that if we kept up with the economic growth of the rest of the world, or most of the rest of the world right now, our market should have been surpassed 60,000 by now. So really, we're not doing as well as the Trump administration's trying to say that our economy's good because it's at 50,000. It's not. That does not pan out. Also, I want to point out a news item about the Zorro Ranch. It is the only place not raided by the FBI so far. They have done Palm Beach at Epstein's house, in New York at Epstein's house. They have not done it at the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, and we find out now this week. Last week's episode was actually called Unmasking Zorro. Well, seems like Zorro was unmasked, and we find out it's actually Don Huffins, a Republican politician. When we first started talking about the Zorro Ranch, it's like now it's owned by somebody else. So can authorities go, and now that it's privately owned, and do an investigation? Because local authorities want to do an investigation. They want to dig up Zorro Ranch and find all of the children's bones. Yes, that's how nasty it is. But we find out, bought with an LLC so that he would remain secret, Don Huffins, who's, of course, very tied to Epstein, Trump, and everybody. They got Don Huffins to buy Zorro Ranch for a very low price using an LLC so that nobody would know that it was Don Huffins who bought it. A Republican, former senator of Texas or New Mexico, I don't know. But again, they're protecting pedophiles. They're protecting the Zorro Ranch. Will the Zorro Ranch get dug up? I predicted a couple weeks ago that it will happen in the next 5 years. Now I'm saying maybe let's hope for the next 5 months. Another thing, you heard about the El Paso airport getting closed down. It was supposed to be for 10 days, and then it actually lasted about 10 minutes, and then they reopened it, and everybody was saying, why? Why? Why would they close down the airspace in an international airport of El Paso? They talked about, it has something to do with going to war with Mexico. They talked about drones and lasers, and it turns out apparently the Pentagon mistook a party balloon for a drone. They shot down a party balloon? Or is that the story they're telling us? It's so chaotic, and they love it. They love it. They look like idiots if they accidentally shot down a party balloon, but also it makes the story go away. People laugh it off and stop talking about it. Here's another thing that was revealed this week. Todd Lyons, who is the actual head of ICE, he revealed that Kristi Noem completely lied about that story in Minnesota having to do with shovels. So this is right before Alex Preddy got murdered by ICE, or Border Control, I think it was actually. Kristi Noem said there was an ICE agent who was trying to arrest somebody, and then other guys came out of the apartment with shovels and started to beat him with the shovels. Well, it turns out none of that is true. They were trying to use the two guys that they were going to arrest. They were trying to say that, they're the ones who perpetrated this attack on ICE, when in reality now they're holding two ICE agents. This was all a lie, and two ICE agents might get prosecuted for breaking procedure. And so, broken windows, damage actually done by the ICE agents, we don't know. But Todd Lyons, the actual head of ICE, said, Kristi Noem, no, that's not true. The story she told is not true. It seemed like there were no people with shovels. So it just keeps going on and on. Another thing revealed. An Epstein body man, a bodyguard of Epstein. His name is Igor Zinoviev. Why do they all sound like they have Russian names? Igor Zinoviev, body man of Jeffrey Epstein. This is years ago now, maybe 10 or more years ago. Brad Edwards is a lawyer for some of the survivors. And Igor Zinoviev told Brad Edwards, you better back down. You're asking too many questions. You're on Jeffrey's radar, and that's a place you do not want to be. And Brad Edwards said, why? Whose feathers am I ruffling? Why am I on his radar? Why am I so important all of a sudden? And he goes, you're ruffling the feathers of the wrong people. You do not want to get involved in this. And he goes, who is it? Igor Zinoviev then said 3 letters across the table from him. Those letters were CIA. And Igor Zinoviev told Brad Edwards that when Epstein was in prison in, 2009? He was in prison for 10 minutes because he's a child rapist, and that's all you get if you're a multi-billionaire who helps other multi-billionaires rape children. When Epstein was in prison, he sent Igor Zinoviev to Langley, to the CIA, 8 different times. I think Epstein was in prison for a little more than a year, a little less than a year. 8 times. Epstein, through his bodyguard. How secure is that? The bodyguard goes and gets information from Langley, from the CIA, and brings it to Epstein in prison. That's how powerful this guy was. And he was the employee of Donald Trump. Thomas Massey, yesterday morning on ABC, one of the big Sunday morning shows, he called this the Epstein administration. That's where we're going. That's where people are at. Now I want to talk about a couple really funny things. After we take a short break, you're listening to A Satellite View. We'll be right back. On A Satellite View, find our website, satelliteviewpodcast.com. Go to YouTube and search for Satellite Podcast, and you'll find our YouTube channel. Subscribe, it's free. And you can see this show with all the clips that I play. You can actually see the people talking. And you can see my little set here. Ice out of Minnesota. It's related to a funny story I want to get to here. But also saying you can find me at Todd Mickelson on different places like Twitter, although I don't do much there anymore, Blue Sky, all the places. I think those are all the things I'm supposed to say. I'm going through my notes here. There is a lot of news that I'm not sure I'm going to make it to. There is things are still happening in Ukraine that are pretty severe. Still going toward things falling apart, getting way worse and very more scary for Putin and the Kremlin. Might have time to read you a few headlines about that. But Ukraine is absolutely kicking their ass. I don't know how much longer it can be sustained because we keep thinking at every week that Russia's going to fall, the Russian Federation's going to fall, and Putin's going to fall. And we do think that again still, yes, this week. It's moving slower than we hoped, but... So what I'm telling you is there are some news stories I might only end up mentioning because we do got to have fun with this, all right? The Great Unravelling is the unraveling of these horrible people, the unraveling of the Trump administration, the Epstein administration, the unraveling of these rich billionaires. And by the way, there should be no billionaires. You hear people say, it's okay if you become a billionaire. I mean, the free market, cake. If you're a billionaire, you should be giving away 90% of your money. Screw you. I was going to use a worse word, but I'm, believe it or not, trying to clean up my act here. Anyway, I'm not going to rant about that. I want to get to some hilarious things. Now, I'm calling this episode The Great Unravelling because during The Great Unravelling, there's a really funny incident that I'm calling The Great Minneapolis Dildo Pelt. Almost was going to call the episode that, but I think it might not be able to stay up then on the platforms. The Great Minneapolis Dildo Pelt happened. There is a hilarious video of this in Minneapolis. Makes me even more proud to be from here, where some protesters at the facility in Minneapolis brought, I don't know, it looked like they bought a couple hundred dildos. And people were, as ICE is like driving in or out of the facility, people are going and sticking the dildos to the back window and sometimes to the side or front window and windshield of their vehicles. I don't know if you know, I kind of learned more about dildos on this particular video. Apparently you can stick them to things, so it was hilarious. It's hilarious. It is out there. You can find it on YouTube, video of this. And they're also just throwing the dildos at the cars, pelting the cars. Just boom, 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 boom. And they're all these rubber dildos in different colors, purple, pink, we got to take a moment to laugh. Do we not? There's also in some of this video, by the way, one of the dildos goes in the window of one of the vehicles and just smacks an ICE guy right in the face. That's why they're wearing masks. They're wearing masks to protect themselves from being pelted in the face with a dildo. Yes, we got the greatest protesters here in Minnesota. ICE, of course, is still here. Tom Homan says we're going to, it's over. I can't imitate him. It just sounds like he's got marbles in his mouth. But we're not talking about Tom Homan. We're talking about dildos. So in one of these videos, there's a woman who has a loudspeaker. You know how that happens at the protests. There's somebody saying stuff through a loud, what do they call it? Bullhorn or whatever. And she is yelling at one of the cars. She's saying, "Your mom doesn't love you. She called me and told me last night." Oh my God. So not only are these protesters brave for sticking to it and going through all of January where we just had a brutal cold, not below 0 Fahrenheit, but below 10 below 0 Fahrenheit. There were nights where the air temperature got to be negative 20 Fahrenheit. That is cold, and these protesters were still out there. And now these protesters are being creative and hilarious. The Great Minneapolis Dildo Pelt. I'm looking at there is a news story about that the FBI did investigate Trump on 2 different times, and they found biological corroboration for these credible accusations. The FBI said, this person is credible. Trump has been credibly accused of wrongdoing in the Epstein files. So Pam Bondi, yes, you did break federal law by lying to Congress the way Representative Liu accused you of. And you said, "You cannot accuse me of a crime. Do not dare." Well, you've been proven to lie in this instance, and Trump's been proven to lie. And everybody who says Trump's been proven to have done no wrong, it's absolutely false. So far, he's been mentioned 38,000 times, and that's in only apparently 2 to 3% of the files. So I may have time to read you some details on that, but I think it's more important because my last 2 episodes were the darkest episodes I've had to do. Last 3 episodes, probably. So we got to talk about the fact that a few weeks ago, I was reminded of this because of this story that actually came true. I was going to joke about, because people are saying the Epstein files are the only safe place in America. It would be easier to name the people who are not in the Epstein files because there are more people named in the Epstein files than not. And I thought, yeah, let's just, I'm sure everybody's named. Abraham Lincoln. I was going to do a joke like that. I think I kind of forgot about that joke because, as you can tell, it's really not very funny. But here's what makes it art. Not me, them. Pam beat me to the joke. Pam Bondi beat me to that joke. She released a list of names. On that list, it includes Elvis Presley, Janis Joplin, Marilyn Monroe. Here's your list. Are you happy now? Marilyn Monroe died in 1962. Jeffrey Epstein was 10 years old or something. What? Marilyn Monroe is in the Epstein files. Okay. They actually did it. I want to check and see if Abraham Lincoln is on that list. I'm trying to name for you the most absurd people. Janis Joplin died in 1967, I think. Elvis Presley was, all right. So, of course, they're just trying to muddy the waters. Of course, they also put people like Thomas Massey. He's on that list, and so is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene's daughter came out and said how absurd that was, and how absolutely desperate, and how absolutely lying and conniving and corrupt the Trump administration is. And Marjorie Taylor Greene herself says, people are trying to blame Pam Bondi. No, this is Donald Trump. He's the guy at the top. It's on him. That's Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that. So when Marjorie Taylor Greene was put on this list, along with Marilyn Monroe and Janis Joplin and Elvis Presley, she said, wow, you're saying there's 30 pages where I'm mentioned? Okay, unredact them. Please release the 30 pages. I, for one, would love to see what you have on me. just like Jared Moskowitz said to Pam Bondi, hey, can you get your burn book out and read to me what you have on me? I can't wait. I want to see. I want to rate it. I want to see how good it is. And she wouldn't do it. And so he's like, oh, come on. Give me your best shot, Yeah, a lot of funny moments going on because the Great Unravelling is so thorough that we now, who are not being affected, we who are not in the Epstein files, like Nutlick, Howard Nutlick said, I was going through the Epstein files to find my name just like everyone else. And then immediately he said that in a hearing with Congress, a congressperson said, no, not everybody was going through the Epstein files looking for their name. You and everyone you know were. You and everyone you've ever met on planet Earth were, apparently. So you feel like everyone was. But no, I live in a world where I don't know anybody who's in the Epstein files. So no. We're witnessing the Great Unraveling. It might be scary. That's something that is being said. If all of this information came out, our entire government would collapse. Okay, wow, really? It sounds like it needs to collapse. I'm such a fan of the White House, both the television show, The West Wing, I guess, was the television show. But talk about hero worship. The White House, I was such a huge fan of the White House. I have watched as much footage as I could find of the White House. The horrible black and white footage that you can barely even see what the hell's going on of tours of the White House going back to when Harry Truman first rebuilt it because it was falling apart. We talked about that in an episode a while ago about how the whole interior of the White House had to be rebuilt because it was falling down. I've watched that footage. I watched the footage of Jackie Kennedy taking a tour on national TV of the White House. So if there was hero worship, maybe I was worshiping the White House, and now at this point, Trump already tore down the East Wing. If if we need to crumble everything, if we need to tear down the White House, I'm fine. I'm fine with that. We need a brand new system. Kamala Harris herself said, no, I'm not running for president. You asking me if I'm not going to answer that because I don't want to be a part of a broken system. And this system is completely broke. So the Great Unravelling, if our whole government has to come crumbling down and we have to rebuild something new, something better, how will that make you feel? We need not fear in this era. They do. And now I'm not trying to drum up hate. I'm not trying to, by the way, another thing I forgot to mention, a couple more January 6ers who were pardoned and let out of prison by Donald Trump have been rearrested for sexual assault this week. Okay, sorry, I just had to stick that in. So many headlines this week. And that horrible story makes me feel better. Like, yeah, you see? Now, remember how I've been talking about that Donald Trump did not win the 2024 election. Now, what if Kamala Harris came out and instead of conceding the election, she said, we have proof that Donald Trump stole this election? Where would people have been? How would people have accepted that? Or would they? Even left-wing people would be like, oh, come on now, that's a weak argument. That's what Donald Trump was trying to say about the 2020 election. Come on, man, you need to concede. Now, after they're using stories like, oh, we shot down a party balloon, and that's why the El Paso airport had to be closed down. What? They're telling us stories like that? Do we believe a word they say? The actual head of ICE coming out to Congress and the public saying, of course Kristi Noem lied. All of these lies being revealed all the time, constantly. We don't believe a word they're telling us. And the Maggots, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the queen of the Maggots. If some information came out now that said there's proof that Elon Musk used Starlink to change votes in all the swing states and other places as well, just enough to make sure Donald Trump had this overwhelming, unprecedented, winning all of the swing states, which has never happened, winning these certain margins. I've gone through the details in past episodes, winning all of these margins just to make sure that he wins the presidency. New information came out that, yes, Donald Trump stole the election and Kamala Harris actually overwhelmingly won the election. Now, how would people take that? Now, how do you feel about that? How did you feel about it when you were listening to this show and I said those things months ago, a year ago, more than a year ago? And now, how do you feel about it? How do you think these Maggots feel about it? If that information came out today, would they accept it? Would they say, that makes sense? I think they would. I do. That's what the evidence looks like. Yes, they would. That's where we're at. Do not be afraid in this great unraveling. The horribleness that has ruled our world, actually for thousands of years, is unraveling. It needs to go away. And it is. It's being proven. And they're on their last throes. So they're getting more and more crazy with their stories and their lies. And it's not working for them anymore. Because the overwhelming majority of people in the world understand all of this. So do not be afraid during this great unraveling. Let's start thinking about how we're going to rebuild this, because we are going to rebuild it. So start thinking about, wow, you know what would be a better thing than what we have now? Start thinking about that in all of the issues, because that's what we're going to be doing in the next few years. We're going to be rebuilding what has unraveled. I'm feeling really great this week. I hope this show was more fun. I think it was. I mean, we went all the way to talking about the Great Minneapolis Dildo Pelt. So I think we were having more fun this week than we were talking about. I'm not gonna say the things we were talking about. Let's keep it on dildos. Let's keep our minds fixated on dildos for the moment, okay? Let's stay on a dildo vibe for the rest of the week. We'll see what happens this coming week, and I have a hunch that next week's show is going to be even more fun than this one. I doubt there will be another story to top the Great Minneapolis Dildo Pelt, but I think we're still going to have even more fun next week than we did this week, because the unraveling is going to have unraveled even further, and it's going to be incredible. So thank you so much for sticking with me and listening to this week's episode. I will speak at you next week.
You've been listening to A Satellite View with Todd Mickelson. Go to toddmickelson.com for links and more information.